Just a reflection from when I was a minister in government. What I've often spoke about, maybe some of you on this call have heard me say it, it was just how reticent national government was to work with the faith community. I think they actually actively don't see it being an option to deliver through the faith community, because they just see as though that might be an issue that will cause division. Or, I often say, when I was health secretary, for those who've not heard me say this before, the first cut I was served up when the cuts were coming post 2010 was the hospital chaplaincy service. They don't see the value of it. They genuinely don't at a national level. Whereas if you then come out of that and come in from this level, absolutely you see it the completely opposite way round. You are the glue of our communities. You're the kind of the bedrock of our communities. And, the resource that you potentially offer to us is massive if we can understand how to mobilize it. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? And as a country, we've never done that, really, I don't think. We've never mobilized our faith communities together. And the unity part of this is really important. Not mobilize them individually, mobilize them together. And that might be a challenge for some of you on this call, in terms of how your relationships locally with different organizations. But the power comes from the togetherness, doesn't it? That's where you unlock the power of this. And then the wider faith community working with the business community, and that I think is this is where the contribution comes from. The relationships, I think, the trust, the relationships, the togetherness, the unity. And for, in terms of just another reflection on politics in the church, there's a famous saying in the city where I speak to you from: deeds, not words. I.e., do it rather than talk about it. And I think faith leaders, churches might be sometimes as accused of this as politicians are, that we're more about words than deeds, that we don't actually follow through the things that we say in our speeches, or you say on a Sunday, or all the rest of it. And I think we're living in an era where young people in particular want deeds, not words. They want to join an organisation that does and makes a change. And I think that's as true of faith organisations as it is true of political organisations. But the more that we can be aligned so that the change that you can make gets multiplied, I think the more exciting it becomes. I often remember the impact that Bishop James Jones had when he came in 2009 and chaired the Hillsborough Independent panel for us. Faith can reach areas that politicians never can, and leaders can rise above some of those kind of rivalries, tensions that are in the room. Organizations in some ways sometimes will go with what you're saying, sometimes more than with what we are. And James Jones, I remember with Hillsborough, was able to sort of heal those tensions and get people to sort of work with what was trying to be achieved and kind of make people see the common good. And I think this is where faith leaders, you've got maybe more ability to do that than you might realize sometimes, that ability to lift yourselves above the fray. And the fray is there in anything that we're trying to do in terms of change at a community level, and almost ask people to buy into the common good as opposed to sort of, pursue individual rivalries. My job and Marvin's job, I think, is to open the door for you to play that role. But once you're there, I think it is to play that role as ambitiously as you can. In our case, what we think the way to go is to have a number of defined missions across the city. So ending rough sleeping through a bed every night that's clear, and we understand that one. I think the food network is coming fast behind it now. Organising a GM level linked to structures in all 10 boroughs. And I will be looking to some people within the faith community again to lead that work for us, working with others. I think we've got to create the spaces for you to then go in and play those leadership roles with our blessing, our support, but not us sort of trying to tell her. When a politician stands in a room and says, you do this and you do that, a lot of hackles might rise. I think when you do it, I think people are more prepared to say, right, we can see this is not because of political agendas or anything else. City leaders have got to create that structure for the movement for recovery so that you feel you can find your places within it, and then perform a role that allows you to kind of extract the full potential of what you could you can offer. Ian has absolutely done that on homelessness for us, no question. That's in some ways our job, really, to say this is what we are asking from you. And then once you have the clarity of the ask, I think that's then easier to take out to member churches, organizations, congregations. Let's say on food, the Food Network, and if we take that issue of holiday hunger that Ian mentioned, I've promised Marcus Rashford that we will have the best child nutrition support system here anywhere in the country. So I've made that. When you make it to someone like him, you're on the hook a bit. So I think our ask then becomes clear from that. In the school holidays, let's say we want a church in every ward in Greater Manchester to become the base for. Do you see where I'm going? What I think we have to do for you is clarify the ask. And then in that base or bases, if we've got two, say, if it's a big local authority ward, all the churches then need to provide the volunteers who are going to be at that base to provide those meals for those kids, breakfast, lunch and tea for the duration of those school holidays. So that's how I see it. It's, you will be able to, I think, to kind of get through to people and maximize the contribution from the community, the clearer we are about what we're asking for from you. We need to be very specific about what we want, when we need it, and how many volunteers we're looking for, that kind of thing. And if the more specific we are, I think the easier it is for you to mobilize people to that cause.
There'll be overarching themes that will be similar for all of us. We got precariousness. There'll be precariousness in housing, increased debt, the legacy of increased domestic violence and child abuse in the home, hunger, educational catch-up. And I think I see educational catch-up across three themes, which is academic catch-up, mental health, but also those people who have just drifted out of education, without any pastoral support and are in some kind of life limbo now. We'll see those themes all over, but where you choose to focus will be down to your local conversation, I'd suggest, because they'll be subtly different in different places. I would just challenge everyone churches to do what we did in Bristol, not challenge in a negative way, but I think it was helpful. I went and we had I think the first gathering, we had about 90 church leaders turn up. And now what we do is every 6 months, they meet at 7 o'clock in the morning. We've kept it going on Zoom, and you have 70 church leaders turn up. And I would talk about what the city challenges were to give those church leaders some of that raw material. Now, some of the challenges you see might not be the high profile challenges. So we brought that challenge about kids in the care system. It might be that you want to make a commitment that no child is in the care system unnecessarily. Every child will have a home, right? And then as a faith community, you say, well, let's come up with 200 foster families between us. And then let's all work as a church community to support those foster families. So it won't necessarily be one of the high profile infrastructure issues that's in the news, but just stuff that you do to support families and communities, but it's a focused area in which you could take action. Because I said, local conversation, just get yourself together, have that chat and begin to work with the raw material of the challenges that you know about. But my point is always turn up with an offer. Don't turn up with an ask or a harangue. Turn up and say, hey, we got a whole bunch of people and resource out here. We want to do good for the place. How can we support you? And I think, I got a lot of ribbing on Twitter because I am a Christian, and then they were talking to me, Reverend Rees and all that type of stuff. And my chief of staff, Kevin, said, the churches are turning up with resources, commitment, wanting to get stuff done. What are we going to do? Turn them away? Let the Twitter world go on about their nonsense. We're dealing with people who want to get stuff done. And so if I think you turn up with an offer like that, I think most people at the moment will bite your hand off.
There's different ways of engaging, isn't there? Just engage and find some common ground is what I would say. Regardless of political party, most people in office will say, okay, we can agree on that. And then surprise them with the scale of your offer is what I would say. Got 40 organisations, X many volunteers behind this now. Ian has done that to me a lot over the last few years. I've always been surprised at the scale of, hang on a minute, you've already, and I think that is where people start to believe you've got an infrastructure that can actually do something. Find out what they're interested in, what they're trying to do, and then kind of say, well, we can help with that, and here's how. And then surprise them a bit with the scale of how much you feel you can do. The issue is always to get beyond those political tensions, because they're always going to be there, aren't they? They exist in every community. It's when you get place-based working going properly, I think that it becomes much more than the sum of its parts. It really does. And I think then they will see what it's doing, and then they'll expand to areas that might be of more interest to you as opposed to interest to them. If you see where I'm coming from, it's all about relationships, I think, and trust, and building that out from the bottom up.